So before we get started, I want to stress that what I do is not for everyone. Low intensity builds, of course, have their place in Guild Wars 2. They are very good at what they are very good at, which is to provide high value for low effort. But personally, to me, I think it kind of ruins the game, you know? And maybe after watching this video, you'll think the same way. Let's get into it. Starting off, probably my biggest quarrel with low intensity builds is that they make the game too boring. Like legit, you have this massively powerful profession that has all these cool skills, great mechanics, weapons, trait line combinations, all these great things going for it. And you condense it down to 3 buttons. Really? 3? Playing a low intensity build is like playing those idle mobile games where you can only press 1 button every 10 seconds and you're still doing 10,000 more DPS than the sweaty elementalist main. It slows down the gameplay so much for me that it's so boring. It is so boring. Like legit, I fall asleep. And the only reason I stay awake is because I'm blasting David Hasselhoff in the background. Like, that's the only reason I stay awake. Like, I need to play a build that has way too many buttons to press, that is overly complex for whatever reason. I don't know. That's the only way that I can stay so engaged with the game and not just be bored out of my mind. And that's probably why I really love the Elementalist, and probably before that why I love the Engineer, is that they had all these different buttons, they had all these different things that you had to be watching and waiting to use because there's a right time for everything. Like, I loved that. And unfortunately, low intensity builds really just don't do that for me. They don't keep me engaged enough. They don't hold my attention. Probably itching that creative scratch that I occasionally get, but I love making my own builds in Guild Wars 2. Build diversity and honestly build exploration kind of just get nixed because of low intensity builds. Someone has mapped out every button that you need to press, every skill that you use, every trait, I mean, everything. It's honestly really uneventful. One of the reasons that I've played Guild Wars 2 for so long and I've enjoyed the game for so long is because I like to make my own custom builds. I like to make these weird off-meta professions that are like really good at what they do in this very narrow window because that feels unique to me. I created that. A part of me is in there. I mean, hell, I played a Burning Paladin Firebrand that used an axe and a shield as its main weapon set. Honestly, I played a core turret Engineer that had nothing but turrets as all of its skills. Like, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And again, I reiterate that what's really important about that is when you create your own build and you kind of let your thoughts go and your build mentality flow, is that a little bit of you is in that build. And I think that's what's really important and kind of gets out of the way of low intensity builds. Low intensity builds have those really tight structure. They tell you exactly what you do, everything's lined up, and then that's it. Now, I will say, to be fair, meta builds also have a lot of this. Now, meta being the builds that are performing the best at that given time. They have that same kind of structure, everything's lined out. So I will say that that falls into that category a little bit, but usually meta builds, you have to button mash a heck of a lot more. I'm interested though. These are my thoughts on low intensity builds. What do you think about low intensity builds? Tell me down below. I'm interested in hearing. On my competitive side of gaming, hence why I've loved PvP in this game so much, I like to be on top. I like top damage, I like top DPS, I like getting the top kills in PvP. I like knowing that I absolutely obliterated the competition, even when the competition is on my team. And I also, again, I have to stress, I'm an incredibly competitive person. And while yes, some low intensity builds are like 4 or 5 buttons and you get 30,000 DPS, it usually can be topped by someone who is really in tune with what their character, and they may or may not be playing a meta build, but they have found a build that works for them and they are willing to work for. And again, I'll stress, meta builds kind of capitalize on this. They look at what balance changes have happened recently, they make adjustments accordingly to whatever's really pumping right now, and they say, what can we do to exploit this to make this profession really work? And again, I will stress that kind of falls into line with meta builds, is because usually they They're really engaging. They are cookie cutter, so you know exactly what you're gonna do. But you have a lot of buttons that you gotta press. You have a lot of things that you're worrying about to really squeeze out as much damage as possible. Low intensity builds, on the other hand, just kind of provide adequate DPS. And that really doesn't sit well with me for how competitive I am. I need to work hard. in my mindset, I don't want to just be adequate. I want to win. I want to be on top, and usually low intensity builds won't be able to do that for you. So if you made it this far, you should totes subscribe for more caffeinated giveaway. I don't know. We'll talk about that later. Before I go on, I do have to give low intensity builds some credit. Understand this, low intensity builds absolutely have a spot in Guild Wars 2 because they're really good at what they do. And I wouldn't be doing them justice if I didn't speak about why they are so popular and give them credit kind of where credit is due. First, low intensity builds are really good in most settings, PvP, PvE, World v World, what have you. You have all these low intensity builds that are fantastic for general use. And to take it a step further, if we look at like challenge mode strikes or raiding, where you really have to be paying attention to what you're doing, where you're standing so you don't die, low intensity builds where I only have to worry about 3 buttons down here on the keyboard and worry about not dying, I mean, that makes it a little bit more palatable. You can still provide your great damage, but you're not dying nearly as often. So remember, you can't DPS when you're dead. Also, low intensity builds are great for the casual player. Let's be serious. If you only get 2 hours a week to actually sit down and play video games, and you don't want to spend all that time going through all the builds and being creative and spending hours trying out these different variations to see if they do slightly better. You essentially have a build that someone has tested, has made sure that it works well, and has given it to you. That way you can enjoy your 2 hours of gameplay actually enjoying the game rather than just crunching numbers. And the last thing I will say is that if you don't really care about being super competitive, and being on top of the charts or getting the most kills or what have you, then low intensity builds are absolutely for you. There's so many people who don't really care about that. A lot of people just focus on, can we kill whatever we're trying to kill? Can we kill the strike boss? Can we kill the raid boss? It honestly just lets you focus on the fun of the fight versus being on top of DPS. And again, I will stress, that's just me. Personally, I love my builds. The way that I play and the way that I think, especially about the game, is great. But I also realize that it's not always going to be for everyone, and low intensity builds are fantastic at that for those who really just don't want to have to put a lot of time and effort into their rotation to yield good results. But again, I like the intensity. I mean, that's probably why I like the Catalyst. Wait, you've never heard of the Catalyst? Huh, well, let me tell you. This video here will show you everything that the Catalyst does great and why it is the most overpowered profession in the game. Stay caffeinated, folks.